search and seizure, which often in digital spaces basically is a right to privacy. And they work on all sorts of cool stuff. They protect net neutrality. They protect end-to-end encryption against backdoors. They protect Section 230 of the CDA, which lets you chat on social media without the government mucking things up. Oh, it's live? Oh, great. Oh, hello to anybody who was waiting on the live stream. We've been waiting for that to finally get going. You haven't missed much. I've just been doing my intro spiel. So as I was saying, yes. The EFF has been around since 1990. Oh, please mute that. Okay. Not have that muted. Thank you so much. All right.
Digital
technical stuff. Yeah, so I was not expecting that to just come in. EFF's been around since 1990. You know, I think they just celebrated their 33rd anniversary a few days ago, actually. We've been around almost as long, since 1991. You can ask more about a long history lesson, but originally the EFF was going to be a chapters-based organization. We sprung up as the first one. They ultimately didn't go that route. We're still around. But they actually have kind of revisited the idea in recent years. There's what's known as the EFA, or the Electronic Frontier Alliance, which is a network of about 100 digital celebrities groups all around the country. We are one of the largest and the oldest. I think the second oldest is EF Georgia from 1996. But none of us directly legally affiliated with EFF, but we all affiliate with them on various lined issues on digital celebrities. It's kind of peer-to-peer activism, and activism of the internet, you might say. So they focus mainly on national legislation. We're focused at the city and state level. We mostly do education, but we also occasionally do political advocacy. We've also been known to throw cool cyberpunk parties when we can convince tech millionaires to give us money for them. So if you know any, send them my way, and then you can have a cool cyberpunk party. And so,
what's cyberpunk?
Cyberpunk, it's a literary movement. I suggest reading the Wikipedia page to get started, but it's about imagining how tech and capitalism can go wrong, so it's very fictional.
Because what could go wrong?
But if you've ever heard of the book Neuromancer, it's probably the most famous cyberpunk novel, though there's many others. It emerged in the 80s, but its ethos influences a lot of digital celebrities activism. Matrix is sort of cyberpunk. It's also kind of tech noir, but I won't go there.
That's next month's talk.
But anyway, we do education, primarily monthly meetup, second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. here at Capitol Factory. We have a number of fun talks lined up over the next couple months. In August, we're going to have my friend Aslan is going to be giving us a talk on AI art. He is an AI artist. Anybody who says there is no skill involved is wrong, because Aslan's AI art is much better than almost everybody else's. And he's going to be giving his thoughts on, a lot of these thorny issues around the ethics of AI art, how it intersects with copyright, how it intersects with artists' rights, post-scarcity, etc. So needs to be a conversation about that, and Aslan, I think, is one of the best people to lead that. Also in September, we're going to be hearing from some people from the Tech Landlord Watch, basically, talking about all the nefarious ways landlords use technology to harass tenants. So yeah, that should be fun. And then finally in October, we're actually going to be having, the September speaker will actually be, I believe, remote, because she's now at the University of Washington. Our October speaker is also going to be remote. We're going to be beaming in famed Harvard professor and EFF advisor Bruce Schneier, who's one of the most famous cryptographists in the world. He's basically like, if you want to know anything about cryptography, he's your guy. I told him that I wanted him to talk to us about this emerging new technology called passkeys that may be replacing passwords, and getting the good and bad from a security and privacy standpoint on this new technology, because you're going to see more and more of it, so it's important we're all informed about it. So yeah, we got a number of exciting talks lined up. We also, as I said, we also do a bit of political activities. You can talk to me more about that if you're interested, because I've already talked quite a while, but I will say that we've been involved in efforts with the city around governance around automated license plate readers, trying to strengthen the regulations there, since there's not an appetite to just get them banned, so we're doing what we can to at least put as much safeguards in place as we possibly can. We also have been told that we're going to potentially get roped into discussions around the city's Halo camera network as well, trying to strengthen policy there. So working on that. We also had some feedback and participation in the most recent session of the Ledge. We gave testimony on Texas just became the 6th state to pass a comprehensive data privacy law, HB4. We had some testimony on that as part of the official record. We were against it in theory, not because we thought it was a bad bill per se. It was better than existing law, which was none. We just didn't think it went far enough, protected the consumer enough, but we hope to continue to push on that. So anyway, yeah, that's a little taste of some of the stuff we do. We're a volunteer-run org, you know. If you want to get involved, the only barrier is your time and interest and what you want to bring to the table. So I encourage you, if you like these issues, get with me and discuss how you can get involved, because there's always work to be done. Yeah, I guess also I'll say, you know, I usually try to give a brief moment before I turn things over to our speaker to basically give a space for community announcements. So if there's anything anybody would like to share with the community, just now the time. Shameless self-promotion is totally allowed and encouraged as long as it is vaguely relevant to the interests of the digital civil rights community. But if nobody has something, I will then introduce our speaker and we can get started.
Anyone, you got something?
You got some time.
All right.
Let's see. All right, in that case, I'm pulling up, I always try to get the info right, so I'm just pulling up the bio, and then I will introduce, and we can get started. Yeah, this is the part now where I try to make our speakers sound impressive, though it's not very hard with our current speaker here. So our speaker this month is Dr. Molly Roy. Dr. Roy is the Performing Arts Librarian at UT Austin. She's a scholar artist whose primary research focuses on critical surveillance art, bringing surveillance studies and dance studies into conversation. She has published on this topic in the journal Surveillance and Society and presented at conferences internationally. Recent artistic projects include Access Embodiment, a performances research piece investigating surveillance, disability, and archives, and the UT Department of Theater and Dance's production, A Love and Information, for which she received a B. Iden Payne Award nomination for movement direction. She holds a PhD in performances public practice and an MS in information studies, both from UT Austin. So basically, I thought Molly's research sounded just fascinating, and I basically asked her to come here and talk to us a bit about her research. And so, without further ado, I will turn things over to Dr. Roy.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction and for the invitation to speak this evening. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this research with y'all. So if y'all have been here before, then you will kind of know the flow. If not, then I want to also give the preface that this is not intended to be a super formal talk in which you have to hold all of your questions until the end. We are casual, we are conversational. Feel free to interrupt, interject, comments, questions, reactions. So I'm going to start. Yeah, that. So I'm going to kind of give us some general framing ideas, some concepts from my research, and then we will look at some clips of some art. Okay? But I'm actually going to start, before I say anything, by showing a couple of clips. So,
just a little lights to tiny. Since 2018, Amazon's been showing customers a new way to shop, where you can just grab and go. It's Amazon Go.
So I just grab what I want and leave?
Yep.
Wow, that's so easy.
Use the Amazon Go app to enter, then start shopping.
That's it.
That's it. No lines, no checkouts,
No problem.
At an Amazon Go store, you can walk in, grab what you want, put it in your bag, and just go.
Oh, you want me to just take some of it?
It's so convenient. We know some people are skeptical.
Some people.
This is computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion.
Okay, so it's a trap.
Okay, there's no register. It all happens with our grab-and-go technology.
But where do you pay?
You don't.
No, I do. I always pay.
It's simple. Take what you want, put it in your own bag, and walk out. And we have everything you love.
Oh, hey, they have my favorite brand of kombucha. Oh, that's great. You should grab it.
Sure. Can you grab it?
I'm just grabbing it.
You should pick it up.
Hey, it's fine.
Pick it up.
learning.
If you change your mind, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart instantly.
Okay. I am putting the sandwich back, y'all. Different sandwich today. I got no more sandwiches now.
So get your purchase and go. Go ahead, leave. Just walk out.
It's a tip.
It's a tip.
You're trying to trick me.
Here we go. I told you.
It's just notifying you of your receipts.
It was him!
Alexa, search Amazon goes to a black man trap.
Deadlines, no checkout. No, seriously.
Just a damn trap.
So this is obviously parody. This next clip we are going to watch is not. Let's see. Thought we'd fix the problem. There we go. Okay.
Yes.
Hey there, I'm Wanda Sykes.
I'm Crystal Cruz.
And I'm Steve Patterson.
We're hosting the new show, Ring Nation, your daily dose of viral clips from coast to coast, shared by you.
We've got laughs.
Stuff that leaves you in awe.
And dogs giving you pause. On Ring Nation, the stars of the show are you.
This might be a problem, Mark.
Yeah, like it.
Promo for Ring Nation, which premiered back in September, I think. So I could easily spend the rest of our time this evening just talking about these two clips. My purpose in showing them at the beginning is just to set the stage, if you will, or to give us a little bit of a foundation to think about the cultural production of surveillance. So the way that surveillance produces and is produced by different cultural forms, as we see in these two very different clips. So surveillance as something that is not separate or outside of the culture in which it exists. One wants to watch it so many times. Okay. So thinking about surveillance and these different cultural forms, over the past decade, there has been kind of an explosion in surveillance art, keeping pace, we might say, with the explosion in facial recognition, behavior recognition, smarts, everything, and so on. So the term surveillance art broadly refers to works of art, be they visual, performance-based, installations, etc., that take surveillance as their main theme, as a central theme, and or use surveillance technologies within the work. We often now see this word critical put before surveillance art, critical surveillance art. So this is getting at the idea that not only does the work engage surveillance, but that it accounts for power structures in some way. There is a pointing toward or a questioning of power, power relations, who has power, how does power flow in a given situation. So in other words, to what extent does a work of surveillance art push against or call into question dominant societal norms, privileges, hierarchies? So not all surveillance art is necessarily critical. Even works that appear on the surface to be anti-surveillance, counter-surveillance, progressive, cool, really cool art, they are not necessarily challenging power structures or accounting for the systemic inequalities in which surveillance is always tangled up with. Yeah. racism, sexism, ableism. So that sort of analysis around critical surveillance art is kind of at the core at a lot of the academic work that is happening in this area. But I'd like to pause for a moment and just take a step back to talk about terminology. Now, I get that for this audience, for this group, it might seem like a little bit redundant or unnecessary or like kind of basic to stop and be like, wait, but what do you mean surveillance? But one thing that I have really learned over these past years of research is that while surveillance as a term is very commonplace, this is not an unfamiliar word to people, but the definitions are really not fixed and they are often not agreed upon. If anyone was here last month for Dr. Strover, she was mentioning how the Austin City Council does not agree on what technologies count as surveillance technologies, what counts as surveillance. So the lines are a bit blurry in that way. When I talk to people about my research, I am very often asked this question: what do you mean by surveillance? And I generally then get like vague references to the CIA, spy films, like government espionage, etc. This is the definition that I rely upon in my research. It is from surveillance scholar Torin Monahan. Surveillance is focused observation infused with judgment and yoked to a purpose. Surveillance is a key mechanism of influencing, directing, and regulating the behavior of individuals and groups in society. In short, it is a principal mode of governance deployed by institutions and individuals through both technical and non-technical means to assert control over domains and the bodies within them. Super simple, right? I absolutely get that this is a really dense and academic definition, but I think it is really useful and comprehensive. If there's one key takeaway, I think focused observation with a purpose is a really useful takeaway. But for our discussion this evening, I will call in to highlight these particular phrases. So regulating behavior and control over bodies. So with those two phrases in mind and kind of thinking back to the new Ring Nation reality show, let's have a look at this. Some of you might have seen this, something like this. So I asked my Amazon driver to do a dance before he delivers my package. This was a trend on TikTok that emerged early 2022. Users asking their delivery drivers to do a dance for their doorbell surveillance camera when delivering their package. So sometimes people would put this into like the instruction section of the Amazon app or leave a note on the door. And some workers have reported seeing this and completely ignoring it. And then others have worried that to ignore it will result in a negative customer review, which will then jeopardize your driver rating, which is directly tied to your job security. Many delivery drivers, including Amazon Flex drivers, other gig workers, are already subject to employee surveillance, monitored by algorithmic management platforms, which are applications that quantify those customer reviews and other metrics around efficiency and so on. And because this is an automated process, the drivers have little recourse when their scores are impacted by unusual circumstances or situations beyond their control. It's hard to argue your case with the algorithm. Be like, they asked me to do a dance, I had a lot of moves, it took a long time, I was late, whatever it is. So those are people's okay, if you do then decide to comply, you find yourself rendered as content and spread widely across social media, perhaps now maybe television, void of any notion of privacy or consent or compensation. So a recent report from the research organization Data and Society has a look at how surging e-commerce has turned the doorstep into what they call a contested space. It is on one hand private property, but for workers, it is also a commercial public space. And because of the popularity of products like Ring, this space is now increasingly mediated by surveillance technologies. So this is resulting in what the report calls boss behavior, in which users or like the people are exhibiting behaviors that a boss would. So monitoring, instructing, punishing the workers, that type of thing. Yeah, I think that the requested dance videos kind of stem from this similar power imbalance of the boss behavior. But they kind of function in a particular way, right? They're demanding a particular performance that is completely outside what standard job duties would be. The videos are, of course, framed online as like, this is feel-good, lighthearted, yay, entertainment, which allows us to sort of gloss over what we might also look at as the objectification of a precarious workforce to boost your social media following, for example. So my particular interest is what happens when dance enters the footage, so to speak, how it brings our attention to the body in motion, and also to a specific directive to move in a way that can be read as a dance. The dance request comes from the customer, but it is captured, enforced, and made possible by the camera. If there's no camera, there can be no dance. So in other words, the camera impacts the embodied response of the person who is being recorded. But this happens whether or not there's a dance directive. So one Amazon Flex worker in Brooklyn, New York, says, whenever I see a doorbell camera, I change the way I stand. I'll be in a very relaxed position while standing, but when I see the camera, I won't be in a relaxed position at all. I would want to look very smart and very polite. So in this scenario, the surveillance technology effectively alters how someone moves in a given space and time, and the meanings associated with that movement. Or, in other words, the surveillance camera functions choreographically. Yeah, okay, so what do you mean choreography? I don't want to get us like too into the weeds on this part, but there are a few historical points that I will make. The usage of the term choreography dates back to an 18th century dance manual commissioned by Louis XIV, and the notation of French court dances, which you see in this image. This predates this. This is Comique de la Reine, which is considered to be the first ballet. You can see that the balconies here, so these French court dances were all meant to be viewed from above. And as you can see in this picture, it's looking down from above, and it is really focused on patterns through space. So we might say that this view from above evokes this kind of God's eye surveillance aspect. But moreover, these court dances were intended to control, encode, perform social order. They were all about social hierarchies, proper comportment, movement really connected to your status in the court. So choreography and the root of Western concert dance was always connected to matters of the state. From the beginning, really operating as a mechanism of power and social control, regulating behavior, and the control of bodies. Now, we use the term choreography more expansively and with more flexibility. When I use the term, I am most often meaning movement of the body in space and time, and the meanings produced by or associated with that movement. The movement and the meaning might be in line with dominant systems, or perhaps we re-choreograph. We find a counter choreography that pushes against the patterns and the social orders prescribed to us. So connecting choreography and surveillance through a shared concern with the body moving in space and time, I use this term choreographies of surveillance to refer to both surveillance art pieces, so actual choreographed dances that explore surveillance, as well as the way that surveillance technologies themselves function choreographically, as with the Amazon driver that we discussed. So thinking about this idea of space and the way that a Ring camera extends beyond the property line of the person who chose to install it, or thinking about the way a smart thermostat learns the patterns of your entrances and exits in your home, or the way a Roomba vacuum can map and store the floor plan of your house. Or on a larger scale, things like geofence warrants, drones that both police fences and ignore fences, smart borders. Surveillance technologies are reconfiguring space and how we experience spatial boundaries. As surveillance constructs space, I would suggest that it in turn constructs the possibilities of movement within that space. So considering our present moment, the proliferation of new systems and surveillance applications, perhaps our traditional frameworks for understanding surveillance are not going to be sufficient. We might need new, more creative ways to think through contemporary surveillance and its applications. So for me, when I think about surveillance as choreographic, then I become interested in what choreographers have to bring to this conversation. So we should look at some art. I said we were going to be conversational and I wouldn't just talk the whole time, and then I just talked for a long time. Any questions about where we're at? We want to look at some projects? Yeah, okay, let's look at some art. Okay, so the first piece that I want to share is from a group called Open Dance Project, which is a Houston-based company led by artistic director Annie Arnaud. I'm actually not going to preface this one in any way because I'm just curious if there will be any references that you pick out. The Vimeo clips do not do closed captioning quite as well, but I'm going to try to turn it on the system, and we'll see how badly it butchers the voiceover. So, something for everyone to discover.
Welcome, dear visitors, and congratulations on being selected for the inaugural year of the President's Cultural Exchange with the Savage Lands program. Please understand that much of what you are about to see may surprise and even confound you.
entertainment, I bring to you the story of the blonde and the madman. But you are in no real danger yourselves. The efficiency of uniform.
I didn't want to preface this one because I was curious if in what you saw or you heard you might pick up on any references. It's not a test. It's okay if you didn't. Depends on particular things. Anything anybody noticed?
It is not a test, so anything is allowed.
There's stuff I didn't notice. I don't know if it's what you're looking for. I don't know. There were like that part where they were in the 2 rooms. Reminded me of an early episode of Black Mirror.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Black Mirror. I like it. So the part in that room with the screens, we might also think about telescreens in 1984. See, look, no wrong answers here.
That's too obvious.
It seemed too obvious. Okay, you're like an audience plant. I'm going to return to that in just a moment. So also, if you have ever read Brave New World, the references to the savages and the savage lands, so bringing visitors from the savage lands, is a direct Brave New World reference. This piece is really like a mashup of different texts. So it's a mashup of 1984, Brave New World, some Foucault, Discipline and Punish with the Panopticon. Was that?
I know, I just have a question.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I noticed the movement of the camera itself. I mean, it was very choreographed, the movement of the camera. So is this the promo video, or were you able to see this in person?
This is one that I actually went to see in person. That's such an interesting question.
So I'm curious where the audience is within that space, because the camera is constantly moving. So it made me think that the audience was moving along with the camera.
Man, y'all, you two together, please. Thank you so much for coming this evening. So yes, what you cannot tell is that this is an immersive performance.
Great.
So the audience is cast immediately in the role when you walk in as you are a savage. You are a visitor from the savage lands, and you are coming to tour Unicor and to witness what is happening. So you immediately have a role, and then you are invited to move all around to experience the piece from any way that you want. At some point you have to make some choices. This video lets you see both of the separate rooms at a time, but when you actually watch it, there's a screen and you have to choose which room you're gonna watch. It happens multiple times, so you can like watch the other one the second time if you want. So drawing on all of these, it like mashes up all of these really popular texts to your point of it seeming too obvious, there are a lot of people within surveillance studies field who are like, enough with 1984, enough with Big Brother. James Harding specifically argues pretty forcefully that 1984 has completely hindered what we call the surveillance imaginary. So the way that the public is able to understand and envision surveillance. So his argument is that 1984 has kept everybody too focused on authoritarian government control. Meanwhile, corporate surveillance has been allowed to just like go unchecked and now, you know, just balloon to what we now know.
Also, I mean, surveillance is also data surveillance. It's not just seeing bodies as well.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about that stuff.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I would argue that the surveillance of the data always comes back to impact a physical person. So why they are collecting it is always, one, to make money for their own bodies, but then to encourage the physical person to do one thing or not do another, or to either allow or disallow. So I think that that you can't completely take the physical body out of it, even with data valence. And I do think that this piece, because it places itself, it actually places itself in the future. This is supposed to be after the Savage Rebellion of like 2026, I think it is. But it sort of conveniently sidesteps an interrogation of big data because it's drawing on texts like 1984 and Brave New World that were kind of, pre all of that. Also, interestingly, Paradise Lost factors really heavily in here, which there's a whole separate conversation about surveillance and religion that I'd be happy to have with you at a different time. But so the immersive experience of this, though, I think really does allow you to encounter these familiar texts or these familiar narratives in a different way that is really multi-sensory. At the end of the show, there's a security breach, a Unicore security breach, and sirens go off and a guy comes out and he is yelling at the audience, and we're like, and surveillance footage of the audience from the entire production starts to get put up, starts to get projected. So you're seeing yourself, it's part of the performance. It's pretty effective. So this was one that I was able to go and see. To think about immersive performances for a moment. So immersive performances rely upon a sense of audience agency to some extent, a perception of audience agency, this illusion of free will, you might say, that they're like, come in, view the dance from any way that you want, make your own decisions, have your own experience, shape the experience for yourself. However, for the production to work, for it to be successful and not just like a total disaster, the audience has to follow a certain fixed menu of choices. There are necessarily limited options for the event to not fall apart. So the audience has to be choreographed to some extent, yet in such a way that sort of fades into the background, or that the choreography becomes invisibilized and the audience feels that they are always acting through their own agency. So we can extend this model of immersive performance to think about large-scale surveillance operations as themselves immersive productions. Ostensibly, choices are given. Quick example, perfunctory user agreements, right? Clear choice. But the choices are necessarily limited and orchestrated in ways that are not always made visible. We can think here of targeted advertising, right, as a whole. So, or the idea that Alexa and your home assistant is, oh, okay, that kept the thing on. I was like, that threw me off for a second. Apologies. Maybe it is nice and maybe it's weird. That these home assistants will predict your mood, or they will know what you want in order to serve you the best content at the best time, for your convenience, of course. In Shoshana Zuboff's book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, she writes that unpredictable behavior is the equivalent of lost revenue. So the surest way to predict behavior is to shape it before it happens. In other words, to render users or participants as subjects of choreography. Any other
Welcome, dear visitors.
comments before we move on? All right. The next artist that I want to talk about is Michelle Ellsworth. She's an interdisciplinary artist. She is a dance professor at CU Boulder. She has performed here in Austin a number of times. So if the name is familiar, then it is perhaps from Fusebox. Her work is really difficult to describe. It's very complicated and layered. There are often elaborate set designs, custom-built devices, props. There are often, I wouldn't call her work immersive in the same way, but it is usually really participatory, which also allows for these really interesting sort of multi-sensory experiences or these moments of reflection. So in a number of Ellsworth's pieces, she assumes the role of Clytemnestra from Greek mythology. Like super quick recap, Clytemnestra, queen of Argos, wife of Agamemnon, who is a central figure in the Iliad, Trojan War. He's known for the raping, the pillaging, the angering of gods. At one point, he tricks Clytemnestra into sending their daughter Iphigenia to be sacrificed. He's gone for 10 years. When he comes back from the war, Clytemnestra kills him. And Clytemnestra is then killed by their son Orestes to avenge his father. This is all detailed in Aeschylus's Oresteia. So in Litigation State of Exception, Ellsworth does like kind of a feminist remix of the Oresteia. And she's like, what if something different happened than what Aeschylus said? And also after the murder, there was a change in legal process. Yeah, there was like the first juried murder trial. So Ellsworth parallels the aftermath of the Trojan War and the aftermath of 9/11 in regards to the effects on the legal system. So as the subtitle of the piece suggests, both periods reflect a state of exception, a concept that refers to suspension of protocols or rules of law following extraordinary emergency circumstances, like asterisk C, the Patriot Act. So she kills Agamemnon, and because he's the king, this is a political act. So she is labeled a terrorist, and then therefore begins to develop over-the-counter counterterrorism protocols in order to evade surveillance. This piece is a demonstration of many of her over-the-counter counterterrorism protocols. What you see here is protocol hiding in furniture. So the things that she builds really mix like the digital and the analog in like pretty fascinating ways. So she uses chroma key technology. That's the blue box. It functions like a green screen. And a body double, which she refers to as her interpersonal drone. And she uses these to complicate Clytemnestra's location to avoid surveillance. You can see the Citizen 4 poster here, which is the Snowden documentary. This piece premiered in 2015, so it was not long after Snowden, and we'll watch a clip in a moment, and you might hear some language that we would directly associate with kind of Snowden revelations. So the piece has like all of these other elements, ways for the audience to manipulate the videos. There's a button that makes the whole video explode so that the entire audience like has their finger on the button at any time. There's a typewriter that if the audience types, it will control a video that is shown. Some of the other videos. The typewriter only works if you type in English, but what it does, which is sort of like coded racial message there, and what she does not tell you is everything that you type on the typewriter will later scroll down the bottom of the video. So all of your messages captured and made visible to everyone with no prior warning. Okay, this is the only piece that I'm talking about tonight where the full production is available online. So I encourage you, if the clips are interesting, to go and watch it. This one is freely available. But for now, we will just watch a few moments.
And go ahead and snap. Good. Join the class. Get your cardio on. Again, the power of the dance, hiding in dance. People do it all the time. Nope. Nope. 5, 6 knee up and foot down. Boom. Swipe. I like it. I like it. I like it. And snap. Great. Loose the wig. Go ahead and slip on some of these contemporary dance clothes. I'm going to continue the conversation about the power of the dance. Dance is central to my efforts to live a surveillance-free life, of course, because of dance's efficacy at embedding important content and concealing it so effectively that the NSA is not going to be able to tap there's in port 777, I got little some bottoms for you. There's some bottoms. Go ahead and slip those on. Again, the NSA, not even close to cracking the code of choreography. It's really the most effective place to embed important secret information. Okay, stay completely symmetrical. Join the work of Beth Gill, again, the power of the dance. Smoothing, moving, kind of curvilinear, yep. I like it, excellent. And snap and jump to your 99, great. Dark Quest 699, slip into that. We're going to try and extract some telephony metadata from the Orange Crush portal. Go ahead and snap. Great. Again, returning to protocol 111, hiding in furniture. If you can reach your arm in, you check the telephony metadata and portal X key score. Great. And just, yep, perfect. And snap. Okay, let's get outside. Again, the power of protocol blue. You can lose all that stuff, and then I need you to start climbing the back wall. Protocol blue, complicating our location. Again, when you can make your visual information different than what the GPS marking suggests, when the Google map doesn't climbing, when it doesn't match, it adds what we call visual chicken feed to the intel. Climbing, good. Chicken feed to the intel, making it harder to track your location. Climbing. Good. Climbing. Down. Have it. You don't have it. It's right there. Right here. Pick it up. The lower and okay, forget it. Never mind. Forget it. Snap. Okay. Again, continuing the conversation about interacting only with yourselves. Looking at protocol 661, again, interacting only with yourself. Please extract the hand-holding device and attach it, and see what it is. Yeah, just attach it. Oh, 611, attach it to the, yeah, you got it. Hold hands, and again, see the pleasure of interacting only with yourself. This is the safest way to traverse the planet, really. The goal is, of course, safety and to reduce interpersonal runoff and interpersonal waste. So again, make use of the power dance here, so you can make a move, see if you can get a reaction out of yourself. You're your own hardest critic. No. Okay, good. Maybe kiss the hand. Then put your head right on put your head in there. And this is again complicating identity with these little images here. Boom, snap. Great, and here, boom, snap. And this was super fast, investigation of how, again, wars impact legal protocols, both for Clytemnestra and myself. Clytemnestra in Greece, but also, whatever, post 9/11, something, those wars, little something funny happened. And snap. Great, lose the hand-holding device.
All right, there's like a lot going on here. You might have caught the telephony metadata, X key score was one of the NSA programs that Snowden blew the whistle on. Ellsworth also in these clips is playing with this idea of hiding in dance that I think is really fascinating. And on the one hand, she's like making fun of modern dance, right? Because it's like, for being inscrutable, it's like, okay, nobody gets what's going on in this choreography. But in my interviews with her, I think that there is actually a deeper methodology going on there with this idea of hiding in dance. She talks about how dance is not always taken seriously in our society, or our culture. Even among the art forms, it is often minimized, historically feminized, and for that, minimized. So in this sort of place that would always be overlooked, there's radical potential in there, is kind of a core philosophy of her work that I think is really interesting. She calls on, there's a book called Seeing Like a State. The author is going to escape me, but some of y'all might know it. But the idea being that the state, as Ellsworth says, can only see certain types of information. It can only interpret certain things, and the state cannot see dance. The state cannot interpret dance, which is interesting if we think all the way back to sort of original conversations about choreography. So,
almost positing that dance is an encryption technology.
Almost positing that dance is an encryption technology. Exactly. No, like NSA is not even close to cracking the code of choreography. So yes, exactly. So that there's there's revolutionary possibilities there.
There's dirty dancing as well.
There's what?
Dirty dancing.
Exactly.
Beyonce.
Yeah, okay, see?
So it sounds like you can encrypt stuff in it, but can you actually decrypt it afterwards?
Well, that's the
Well, you clearly have to have a partner because you need key pairs, obviously.
Key pairs. Yeah. Can you decrypt it? Maybe that's what we're doing right now. No. Okay. Let's see. So, okay, let's move on. I think that there's a lot of things to be said about the way that the dancer has to be called upon. There was also pancakes at the show. He's like going through all of these ridiculous contortions, these sequences. She is doing this to him for over an hour. Jump, pike position, put this on, take this off, sit like this, do this. He is responding to this like really complicated ongoing directions. So we might think about this.
It's kind of like being the Amazon driver.
So, right, so in this particular way. So we might think about, in this case, being mimicking the hoops that we all jump through for national security. It's almost like a different spin on security theater, or the different ridiculous extents that people might go to try to protect their privacy or their autonomy. There's also sort of like a sense of futility, I think, in it, where it's like this feeling of like you actually cannot hide anywhere without going into the outrageous. I think, let's skip ahead a little bit. Okay, we are going to look at one more piece from Ellsworth called Clytemnestra's Guide to Impact-Free Living. She has also performed this piece with the alternate subtitle, Clytemnestra's Guide to Surveillance-Free Living. I think that her interchanging of the words impact and surveillance is itself really interesting and points toward her central concern with the impact of surveillance and technology on bodies, human and otherwise, on the planet, so forth. So, to counter some of these impacts, Ellsworth has developed a standalone offline internet that is completely functional, including pre-recorded Skype conversations, because even though, as Clytemnestra said, it's like better to only interact with yourself, sometimes you miss human interaction, but this is like a safer way to do it. Lots of other props and gadgets, but I'm actually gonna let her explain this one a little bit. This is actually, what I'm gonna show is not a clip from the performance. It is from this lecture that she gave. However, the performance itself is a lecture demonstration where she's basically sharing Clytemnestra's like anti-surveillance tactics, or how she deals with the impact of technology. So while we're watching a lecture, it's not like entirely dissimilar to what the performance is.
I'm Michelle. I'm reading about my research. To start, I'd like to acknowledge that I live and work upon lands within the territories of the Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples. I acknowledge with the full knowledge. In addition to making Clytemnestra the surveillance-free blue box that you just saw, I built with my collaborators a completely offline internet for Clytemnestra. We made over 30 websites that Clytemnestra could access without being connected to the internet. They function in any browser, and all of the links that you see in the pages that I'm going to show you are real, meaning they really go somewhere. They really link to additional content. In addition to all these websites that we made, we also made video reenactments of Clytemnestra's most consistent conversations with Agamemnon, her husband, Dudu, Penelope, Helen, and Hestus. So the idea was to try and keep Clytemnestra safe, emotionally engaged, and surveillance-free. Because the fact is that the thing about the internet and humans is the internet, well, it's always listening. People sometimes yes, sometimes no, but both are always consistently insecure. So it seemed like a good idea to lock that down in terms of for security. Okay, let me just show you a bit of Clytemnestra's World Wide Web. Okay, here's Pandora. All of these ads and links are active. So from this playlist, I can access Daedalus' sister's replacement apparatus. Where Clytemnestra reached out for both the emotionally and physically absent man. Here's the no gay simulator and other things. You can click on this link to the mower. This was an idea of one of my collaborators, Uli Miller, that Clytemnestra living online perpetually might feel isolated and miss nature, and this is like a lawn mowing simulator that might keep the X off the road. And again, living offline. Here we can link to to World Odin burgers, and from there can relate to murder, craft, and torture. Just giving Clytemnestra, meat-based companions take the edge off the absence of real people, because people and the internet are both inexplicably problematic. That's why it's totally online. A lot of sites are replicas of what you can find on Judith for when she worries about Agamemnon and the plague, but if the tubes haven't arrived yet, post-ordering, she can go
Modern
to
dance references.
Here, here's a TED Talk about hyperventilation. Here's a link to pharmaceuticalart.org, and I'm just going to click here. This work is based on something Duchamp said about artists and self-medicating, and I thought, yeah, that's right, maybe so, let's do it, that's a good idea, and these might be handy for Clytemnestra. So that's what these are. Inside these gel caps are little micro sculptures, paintings of poems, and they are vegan free. So I made about 1,500 of these gel caps for a gig, and at one point I was running out of time. And one of my collaborators, Bruce Miller, suggested I start making placebos. So some of these gel caps are real art, and some are placebos, imitations of the imitation of the imitation. Okay, so here we can come here, and this is where I can link to text Homer, to phone Homer and ask Homer directly questions about his writing and some of his choices he made to marginalize women in the Iliad. These are just a chat log for Homer's responses to my /Clytemnestra's text questions, and one of the chat log was shockingly effective. Homer's artificially generated responses are rude and offensive. Homer's /the chatbot's responses reflect the training data that it consumed when learning to use language to write. The chatbot learned how to use language from how people use language on the internet. And the way that many use language is full of old-time Homeric values like misogyny, colonization, racism, and violence. It's all in there. So it was super easy to capture Homer's vibe.
To capture Homer's vibe.
This was pre-ChatGPT craze, I would guess.
So this was in 2021, I think, that this lecture was.
So the earlier models of it existed, but it hadn't caught on in the mass consciousness.
Yes, so it wasn't like everywhere the way that it is now. I'm curious because the way that Michelle Ellsworth works is that she's always making content that may or may not become part of any of the performances. So when I had talked to her last year, maybe, she was doing dances for wood cameras. She was making little wooden SD cards. She was creating NFTs that were owned by rocks. And so she keeps up with, because I feel like, I don't know if that was like now everyone's talking about like ChatGPT.
Big tech is always creating some new thing that's easy to parody.
And so then she is always like creating a version for Clytemnestra.
I just have to throw it out there. I haven't read it myself, but have you heard of Dave Eggers' newest book?
I have, yes.
Apparently the premise is somebody works at a big tech company just for everyone else, and they basically just keep panicking and coming up with ridiculous ideas that people keep greenlighting,
yeah.
And it just gets worse and worse.
It's just, yes, everybody, I forget what the new one is.
That's all I can think of. Yeah, I forget what it was called.
Is it a parody or a documentary?
It's a work of fiction, yeah, exactly. But it's, the first, Dave Eggers has written The Circle, and then
that was like this big one.
And then this is like this part 2 of The Circle, and I highly recommend. And yes, so going back to the idea of like, why are we still talking about 1984 and Brave New World? Some of those scholars point to Dave Eggers as like a person who is writing newer, like more relevant, equally provocative surveillance fiction. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, skip forward just a little bit. I was gonna talk about some non-dance things, but I'm gonna keep it dance. I'll dance all the time.
I don't see many bored faces.
Okay, there's two more clips that I want to look at, but I don't want to talk at y'all forever. We're going to move now to something very different from Michelle Ellsworth, to Detroit, the work of an artist named Jennifer Harge, her company Harge Dance Stories. And this is a piece called Feds Watching. This piece is really directly about a refute of the surveillance of Black life. Harge describes the piece as saying it subverts the surveillance of Blackness by remapping and manipulating the somatic impulses learned as a result of a surveilled Black embodiment. We can think here about what brilliant and Austin-based surveillance scholar Simone Brown calls dark surveillance, a way of creating imaginative, rebellious practices that forge alternate paths and ways to be and move in the world, countering anti-Black surveillance. So let's watch a clip of this. Talk a little more. Wait for it. There's a ring around the space that I'll just draw your attention to. It's a little bit hard to see. It's not, I'm just going to mention it later, but there's candles, there's hair barrettes, unfurled cigarillos, empty Hennessy bottles. All right, this is a really powerful piece, I think, in a much different way than the others that we have been looking at and talking about tonight. That, again, that circle that I had drawn attention to is around the stage as a protective barrier between the performers and the audience. It even says in the program, they might be watching, but they're not gonna get the codes anyway. So it's really about this protective space. It also, in some way, gestures towards memorials, altars that you would see on the side of the street after someone has been killed. We can also think in terms of protective space about the way that the other dancers were holding a protective space for the soloist in the middle. They move around her, they keep her safe. So I think about this piece really then as a spatial intervention, or what I have called a choreographic countermap. So zooming out to think about this work being produced in the city of Detroit, we can read the countermap of the dance against the mapping of the city through Project Greenlight. Those of you that were here last month, this came up briefly, but initiated in 2016, Project Greenlight is a partnership that joins privately owned and operated surveillance cameras with the networks of the Detroit Police Department and streams live 24/7 footage to one of DPD's real-time crime centers. So here is a map of all of the PGL locations, which include like gas stations and laundromats, but also include entrances to apartment buildings, places of worship, health clinics, addiction treatment centers, and each place actually has a blinking green light to signal its affiliation with the program. So there's a report, one activist has talked about being able to see the blinking light through his bedroom window, getting blackout curtains to not have this blinking light. PGL locations get priority 911 service in Detroit, and PGL locations are also patrolled more frequently than non-PGL affiliates. So in other words, the system shapes the pattern of patrolling, so choreographing even the police then in this regard, and leading often to the over-policing of certain neighborhoods. City added facial recognition to Project Greenlight without initially letting anyone know. The first documented of someone being arrested due to misidentification from facial recognition happened in Detroit. He was a resident of a Detroit suburb. So it's important to underscore here that Detroit is a majority Black city and a city that has been plagued by narratives of blight and the downtrodden. Detroit activist and community organizer Tawana Petty, who now works for Algorithmic Justice League, refers to this as the hyper-surveillance of a community that has never been seen. The majority of crimes in Detroit are what we might think of as quality of life crimes. So people who are advocating against Project Greenlight are asking what might happen if instead of a $1 million contract with DataWorks Plus for facial recognition, that money was reinvested into the community. I go into this detail because I think Detroit is a really interesting place for people to kind of keep an eye on, both because it has often been a testing ground for new surveillance operations and programs, but also because there is a lot of really amazing artist activist work happening in the city. There is specifically a program called Green Chairs, not Green Lights, And they are literally making green chairs. So they're making green chairs and benches. This is community elders, people with some carpentry skills, are teaching younger people how to build wooden chairs and benches. They're painting them green, and all of them say "be seen, not watched" on the side, and they are handing them out to people in neighborhoods with the idea that you could put this on your front porch and that we could look out for one another, and that that is how you create safety in a community rather than through a surveillance system like Project Greenlight. So I just want to highlight that work being done, and that question, I think that really that it asks about what does it mean to be safe, and how do we define safety, safety for who, safety from who, what does that mean, what does that look like in our communities. I'm going to close us out with a piece that I made.
I said shameless self-promotion's a lot.
It's just because it's thematic, so I'll share my own work. So this idea of mapping public space, how we're tracked through public space, was something that I was thinking a lot about in the making of this short film made with a local Austin filmmaker, Jorge Cermini. I call it a work in progress because there were some things that I wanted to do, but it's not like actively in progress. But I was thinking a lot about behavior technologies, behavior recognition technologies, those that are supposed to alert for suspicious behaviors, things that are out of the norm, irregular gait, this type of thing, and the way that these systems, by alerting abnormality, then get to code or choreograph what is considered normal and who is afforded or denied such a claim. So this was made a few years ago too, 2019, I guess.
This body is not coded by suspicion. If I reach suddenly for something, chances are I still get to walk away. The system does not assume I have a weapon, but this body is always already weaponized. Is there an algorithm to detect the weapon of a white woman's tears? Wouldn't you like to know that a crime was about to occur before it happened? With nomadic security on your side, that power can be yours. Our dedicated team has developed advanced behavior recognition technology that predicts dangerous motions and hostile intentions, keeping you safe wherever you are. Our computer vision AI algorithms can spot objects like guns and knives and detect fights, falls, irregular gait, or any movement that deviates from the norm. Designed to work with the CCTV cameras that you already have, our system provides real-time protection, identifying suspicious actions that are commonly associated with criminal behavior. Harness the power of AI to notify you of threats and people who don't belong. Here at Nomadics, your safety and security are our #1 priority. Once activated, our system is always there to protect you, whether you know it or not. Nomadics will optimize your business operations as well. Our marketing program will count patrons, analyze traffic patterns through your establishment, and identify peak zones and times of day. Never let someone leave without receiving service again. Nomadics Security, guiding you toward a better, safer future.
Can I say tag?
actually good to do with those dang Lowe's and Home Depot things I see.
Yeah, it was an interesting day of filming. We did not ask for permission beforehand. I went into stores that were not in my own neighborhood, and we would kind of just go in and scope it out where we're gonna, and then, you know, Jorge would set up the camera and then try to look like a shopper, and I would sort of do my thing. One thing I really want to highlight is the level of privilege that it takes to be able to make a project like that, and that is really the point. Not everybody gets to wear a hoodie and somersault through the aisles of stores and have really actually no one bother them the whole time. So I want to name that, I think, and that's part of what I was trying to get at with the work. The text was written by me, but actually really derived from a website selling this type of technology. So it was only thinly plagiarized. So I will just leave y'all with the question that I am left with, that I continue to think about really what does it mean to be seen? What does it mean, the way that all the different ways that comes up in our vernacular? What does it mean to be seen versus to be watched? What does it mean to be seen and not surveilled? What does it mean for artists and people to stand up and ask to be looked at in a particular way? So this question continues to fascinate me, even after years of research. So that's what I will leave y'all with tonight, and that's how you can get a hold of me. Thanks. This is a very new Instagram that I just started that is charting my surveillance choreography journeys. So that's my other plug, and then my actual email. So.
Well, thank you so much for a great presentation. Do we have any final questions for Dr. Roy? Anything, thoughts, feelings?
Did nobody even look at you weird?
They looked at me weird.
Like, no interaction, really?
No, nobody said anything. I mean, even at like the Lowe's, it was right by the entrance. Like people were having to come by. This was the Mueller HEB. It's a popular one. You'll have probably been there. The looks from the employees that I got there were honestly kind of like, this is above my pay grade. I can't even, like, it was like early, it was like the cafe was just trying to open. Like it was early on like a Wednesday, and they were kind of like, I cannot with this person. That might be like because they all work in Austin too, if that's like if in a different place. There was only one place, a different HEB, where the manager did come up. Yeah, he came up to me. I had been trying a different thing, and I was actually slow crawling through the cosmetic aisle. And we had kind of like, we also tried to like not overstay our welcome. It was kind of like get in, get out, guerrilla style. And he really, he came up and he was like super polite. He came alone. He had no security guard with him. He did not ask either one of us for identification. He was just like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, hey, I'm a doctoral student at UT. And he was like, okay. And then I was like, and we were just leaving. And he was like, I'm so glad.
So what you're saying is if security ever stops you, that's what you tell them.
That's what you say. You're like, oh, I'm making art and I go to UT. But again, like he didn't escort us out. Like he didn't come, so.
Did people see Jorge with the camera at all, or was he able to keep it pretty hidden?
I mean, I think that some people did, and then I think at some point, people saw and then were like, oh, like, they're making a movie type thing, you know, and sort of tried to stay out. There were a few shots that we had, you know, we tried not to use footage that had other people in it for obvious reasons. I think reasons that have become clear. So, yeah.
Any other final thoughts,
Well,
questions?
thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
When I looked it up on the website that said surveillance art, like, I really want to go to the EFF meeting, and okay.
You're like, surveillance art. I know, but I'm pleased that there's sort of like a summer art series happening. So.
Well, and I mean, you know, if everybody enjoyed the talk, tell your smart friends to contact us. You know, we have good content because you send them our way.
Good content.
One more if nobody else does.
I have so many, but then.
We can hang out.
I
am not leaving
a little
some
bit
people,
of time.
you
We have
know,
the room till 9.
want
It is
to-
10:33.
But please don't feel like you need to stay.
And I'll also just say real quick, if anybody else parked in the garage needs a voucher, I have a few spares, get with me. And also, I'll just say that when we are done talking here, we usually go and have a drink in the lobby bar. Anybody is welcome to join us, but we'll finish up the questions first.
Okay. Well, it's just a comment.
Please, yeah.
So I just, like earlier what you were saying, when we're talking about sort of the endangerment of being watched in surveillance, I was thinking of the Squid Game series with the gigantic robot and the movement of the people to, like, when the robot turned its head. Have you seen it?
I haven't because it made me squeamish, I think.
It's pretty squeamish.
There's an SNL, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that, you know, you, like, the robot will be tracked, like, if you pause, the robot will not shoot anybody, right?
Okay.
So when the robot's head is turned,
like
everybody
a
is trying to get to the other side.
And then when it turns,
And then when it turns, so there's
Game
this
of Red Light,
entire,
Green Light,
like,
yeah.
and the choreography is actually about everybody's survival and using each other against each other to not be seen by the surveillance.
Oh,
So it's
okay,
like,
now I have to
how can
watch
not
it for
be seen?
research purposes. Okay,
Exactly.
yeah, I gotta bite the
It is
bullet
a
now.
perfect scene for your research.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It's
Yeah.
very gory.
For
I will
research
warn you,
purposes.
but it
Yeah.
is relevant.
I'm certain you can find that scene on YouTube.
Yeah.
Probably, yes, but no, I will watch the whole thing and I'll just.
I
you
mean,
know.
it's the part
Yeah.
Mr. Beast recreated, so. you know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, that's fascinating.
it's just an inversion of, like, anyway, we can talk.
Yeah.
Email later.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I
Yeah.
will, okay, to write about it.
Who was the, or did somebody else have a question? Somebody said 1984, like we use it too much, it hampers our imagination or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is an argument made by a couple of people. The person's name that I said is James Harding.
Oh, yeah.
He is at Maryland, College Park, University of Maryland. He has, if you are into dense academic books, he has a great book called Performance, Transparency in the Culture of Surveillance. He also makes this argument in an article, I think. James Harding, other people bring it up as well.
Yeah.
David Lyon in his book, new book that's about the culture of surveillance, but I can't remember exactly what it's called, one of his newest books. He's also like, enough 1984, and he's the one that is like, does a full chapter about Dave Eggers, he's like, this should be our literary go-to now. But I think there's a lot of...
Well, it reminded me of, we were talking about what is cyberpunk earlier, and I often have the feeling that cyberpunk has in many ways limited our imagination of what kinds of things technology can become, and so I'm enjoying this newish genre called solar punk.
Okay,
which is
I like
more
it.
like,
Yeah.
what if not all technology had to be used for evil purposes?
Yeah, there's a performance group in town that's called Arcos.
Oh, yeah.
And they do a lot of really interesting work about imagining technology differently. they're here. So that was a little bit of like a funny thing. So that was just like a also, yeah. So check out their work also for other possibilities, imagining futures otherwise.
So the tone of the kind of what you're showing us this evening, it seems like a little bit tilted towards the negative, right? And as to that surveillance generally is not good. You know, is there an opposite viewpoint or a balanced one?
The George Floyd, we wouldn't know about police violence oftentimes without the surveillance of the people.
So, right. Are you asking if there is an argument in general, or if there are artists that are like playing with a pro-surveillance argument?
I think.
Is there pro-surveillance?
Is there pro-surveillance viewpoints?
I mean,
in the arts, even.
Yeah.
I think there was. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of questions there because I don't think that we are seeing a lot of like really great demonstrations of that right now. Certainly in the scholarship, there is this, there is an assertion that surveillance in itself, it's not inherently bad, but it's not neutral. So just like technology cannot be neutral, surveillance cannot be neutral. So it's not that nothing good has ever happened. We just seem to be seeing, in the way that technology continues to replicate all of like the deep injustices of our society, the way that it seems to replicate racism and sexism and ableism and all of these things, we then, surveillance seems to also often be difficult to disentangle from those same things. There was a piece, something that I was going to talk about that was like pro everybody watching. This is the heart cam and the shooting backpack. This is Steve Mann's shooting back. Steve Mann is actually the one who coined the term surveillance or surveillance. So rather than a watching from above, a watching from below. So the idea that the people are watching, like Heather said, sometimes there are things that we would not know about. There's another argument that points to the idea that more cameras is always still more surveillance, and so we like have to consider that in terms of, is it an expansion of the surveillance state? But
and I can actually just contextualize that in terms of the evolving digital celebrities conversation of groups like EFF and EFF-Austin. When they first started being proposed, groups like ours were initially very supportive of the idea of police body cameras. This was just in the wake of Eric Garner. We were seeing the surveillance and the actual potential for justice. But, you know, while we still support it, as we've seen how it's been implemented, our response has become more measured for a couple of reasons, which is one, that the police department can't be the ones in control of when the cameras are on and off or where the data is stored, or we don't actually get true accountability. And another thing that we have to keep in mind is that, you know, that these systems, police can manipulate them. There have been cases of police literally playing copyrighted music to get footage taken off YouTube, trying to hold them accountable. And there's also there's also the issue that, yes, on the one hand, it can serve as a tool of accountability, but then also you've basically turned every cop into a roaming surveillance camera that actually can surveil the very communities they're patrolling. So it's like, could it be used for good? Yes, but the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
Well, I just kind of thought I wanted to add on to that. You kind of asked if there's any like pro arguments. I think two thoughts. Number one, like more often than not, art like this exists because it's saying things that nobody are saying or is saying. And furthermore, like the whole world is kind of a pro-surveillance argument. I've run into so many people that are, but I like my targeted ads. They serve me relevant things, which I call BS on. I've never seen a relevant ad. But like literally just today alone, I at their request for the record, I don't just randomly go on tangents to people, but I went on an extremely long tangent to somebody about all the issues with privacy and data collection and cited things like, facial recognition is provenly racist. Big data and using data in policing exacerbates prejudice and all these words are slipping my mind, it's late. But
systemic inequalities there.
Yeah, exactly. Like it makes inequality worse. And this was literally the first time they were ever hearing any of this. This is the first time they'd ever heard about how school surveillance programs that rose in popularity during the pandemic are outing LGBTQ kids to their parents. This is the first time they're hearing about, the famous story in the privacy community. There was a teenage girl who got pregnant. Her family found out because Target was sending her ads for like prenatal vitamins and things like that. Like, people don't even know about these things. They just think like, well, who cares if they know what I post on Instagram? Facebook uses the gyroscope in your phone to figure out if you're on a bus or in a car or walking down the street. And furthermore, who else is also on that bus with you? Like, people don't know about that kind of stuff.
And
so they never stop to think about like, oh, first of all, that's creepy. Most people are like, that's insane, I'm not comfortable with that, which is a sane response. And number two, they don't know, so they don't have that reaction of like, that's why there's no really like pro-surveillance arguments, because everybody's just like, well, what's wrong with it in the first place? So the onus is on us to say, this is why it's not okay.
And I can corroborate,
The pro-surveillance rhetoric comes from a lot of media that we have. You have like James Bond, you have Law and Order, you have all kinds of like movies, video games, TV shows that portray these characters using these surveillance tools
for good.
And because they're using them for good.
Yeah,
arguably, I would spirit that. But because they're portrayed using these tools for good, there's this inherent like, oh, there's something wrong with this. This is okay, and so that like exacerbates the kinds of conversations that Nick was like talking about, he's constantly having, because we're already getting the pro-surveillance propaganda, and been getting it for decades.
And to put that even further, in our activism with the city, I can certainly tell you that government's position is by default pro-surveillance. Many of our city council members, we're not thinking of any of the issues we raise till we talk to them. Their ways are focused on, if we use automated license plate readers, we can get stolen cars. They weren't even thinking about how these tools could be weaponized for people seeking reproductive care, gender-affirming care, how it could target undocumented immigrants. Like, they weren't even thinking about that. They were just like, we can solve crime.
Which, for the record, is a psychological bias. I forget what it's called, but it's basically where, like, I'm not a terrible human being, therefore it doesn't occur to me how other people will be terrible.
I wouldn't misuse this text, so nobody else would misuse it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, it's just natural human tendency. Like, oh, I wouldn't do this evil thing, so why would anyone else? And then somebody does it, and you're like, oh crap, I should have seen that.
Well, and that's why I love that you're emphasizing always bringing it back to a body, and that means there are bodies behind all these things. That technology is not neutral, and because it's invisible, like we almost have to look at the bodies behind it in order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Well, thank you for starting that whole conversation and asking the hard question. We try to ask hard questions here, even to go against the room's tone. So thank you for that.
It's good for art.
So if I want to learn more about surveillance art, how do I go about doing that? Can I email you or?
Yeah, you can email me. I have
I'll send you a list of people.
or all of the reading.
You can,
like
you can DM me on Mastodon, and I have Molly's email if you don't get it or forget it.
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Excellent.
I'm not on Instagram, so I don't
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Very
There is a lot of, there's some really interesting stuff being written about surveillance art and a lot of really interesting projects. There are not a lot of people that are talking about surveillance specifically in the connection to dance, which was the intervention that I was and am seeking to make. But there are a lot of other people that are talking about theater, and then there's much more visual art, digital art installations that are happening.
To anybody who came to this talk thinking there was no connection between these two topics, I think you proved them wrong pretty persuasively.
Good.
Well, I think it's really interesting the point you brought up about choreography.
Yeah.
About how being surveilled changes the choreography you know, if there was no camera there, people would be moving one way. But with the camera there,
You move.
choreograph it and it's a different.
Yeah. So which is sort of this this idea of like the standard feeling, the feeling of being watched type thing. But because of the way that surveillance happens, like you're saying, from our phone and from all of these different invisibilized ways, it's not always really obvious when it is happening anymore. So it kind of takes away that the more standard or classic notion about the feeling of being watched. Sometimes we know when it's really obvious and it's shaping, but sometimes we don't know, but then it predicts something, and then because of that, then we make a choice, and so we have changed our movement and our choices based on the surveillance without actually even knowing that it was happening.
I mean, to that end, there is a YouTube live stream right in this room.
There's a reason I'm sitting.
Hey, if you know, you know. Look. Yeah.
I just wanted to add a thought to that. We saw that after Edward Snowden you mentioned, there was a huge dip in search terms like terrorism, war on Iraq, because all of a sudden everybody knew that Google searches were being watched.
Everyone was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah.
And then it happened again recently with something else. It's escaping me at the moment. But we saw that again happen recently. And sometimes that's intentional. Like it was in your video, the HEB ones, that this register is being monitored. I've had a lot of debate over whether that's even true. It's just there to deter you and make you think you're being watched. So don't try to steal anything. Make sure you pay for it.
Make sure you pay for it, which it
and
may
then,
or
of course,
may
you
not
mentioned
be.
that it's intentional that a lot of surveillance is not visible anymore because they don't want you to be influenced except in the way they want to.
Well, to that, well, I mean, it isn't even always hyper nefarious. Dr. Strober's talk last month when she was talking about how there's actually a lot of surveillance in the Austin public libraries, they actually intentionally make it not easy to see the cameras because they want to have that function of keeping people safe at the library without making them nervous from that they can see a camera and feel like they're being watched. And we very much debated, we sympathize with the library while also debating if they were going about it the best way. So it's a complex topic.
That is a complex topic. Yeah, I had a lot of feelings as also a librarian. I was like, I'm full of the feelings right now. Yeah, that was kind of interesting, and yeah, that gets into like the
I was
whole
thinking, like,
rule of
my Google search shows the camera see what book I'm pulling out,
Yes, but after 9/11, that was the whole thing of like librarians have always been about privacy and that they don't keep a record of the books that you check out, so that that information cannot be used against you. It's that you are not what you read, so that you. But then after 9/11, they would be asked about certain things and they couldn't say, but they'd put the signs out front. They'd be like, we have not received a Department of Homeland Security request today. Because you couldn't say when you had, just say that you hadn't. Yeah, speaking about dips and things, checking out and searching online of 1984 had a big spike after Donald Trump's election. So a lot of people started looking at 1984 then. Yeah. Anyway.
Any final questions, or we ready to adjourn?
I will be hanging out afterwards, so if you have other things that
we'll all be
you
hanging out
didn't want to
so
say
if you
in the
want
group.
to stick around, hang out. But I want to say, let's give Dr. Roy one more big round of applause. And as I said, if you want to be one of our speakers or have a friend, I always need people. It's as interesting as we all choose to collectively make it. So we hope we'll keep seeing you. Also, a warning to anybody who is parked in the garage, you need to be out by roughly 10 p.m. or the voucher will not work, and it's pretty pricey without it. So if you do join us for a drink, be cognizant of the time.
Stay parked there while you go bar hopping afterwards. You'll be sad later.
Yes.
So amazing. I feel like the last time I saw you, you were talking like in Giselle class.
I think so.
think so.
Like, you were just starting. Just like making us go over. Yeah. This is awesome. I love it. I feel smarter. We have to go because we're like eventually get our website.
In the future, definitely I'd love to give a car.
I used to pre-COVID, but I've been the worst about getting things spun up again.
Yeah, I love that.
And I am actually serious about thank you asking that question. You know, I really like us having different conversations.
Very nice talk. Yes, my son.
We're just going to
Oh yeah?
company.
Thank you for checking out our Meetup. Yeah.
Probably like at least once a month.
That's doing great work.
Anytime it overlaps our Meetup, we'd love to see you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to.
Next month is Ethics of AI Art. Should be fun.
Well, we have technology that a private person could enforce their privacy.
Well, I couldn't imagine.
Interesting. Okay, yes.
Without centralized control.
I like the sound of that. I will look into it more.
Yeah,
Yes.
look at it.
I know. I've definitely featured startups who have products aligned with our values. So certainly, yeah, I'll look into it. I might be interested in having a speaker. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming.
Out of Colorado.
Appreciate it.
On the way to use the multimedia.
Yeah.
Dialogue.
I wasn't trying to be rude or anything, but I'm very passionate about this subject.
Didn't even talk about this also about
You're not keeping you too busy?
No, always keeping it busy.
So I hear you. I'm basically having to learn how to be essentially a cloud engineer. Because I got a startup and somebody's got to do it. So all the time,
I recently got to do my
me
first
all the time.
I got to do my first server migration recently.
Oh, how did that go?
It failed. I just started.
Yeah. I'm trying to get Terraform to spin up secret managers and it's blowing up with versioning and other hilarious fun stuff.
Yeah, I don't even want to imagine.
No, it
Sounds great.
I'm not even having to build the whole thing from scratch. I'm building on expensive consultants work, so I don't even have to know everything, and I'm still like,
Think about if you want to.
We do that all the time. We show up, it's like, oh yeah, somebody else installed the system 5 years ago. And we're like,
I've been going out of this thing
because it was 12 in the morning, and they've been trying to get it to work for 3 days, and they're like, I got it working, success,
and nobody touching it, go home. Lord knows. I think about that every time too. I'm like, in 5 years, someone's gonna come back and be like,
it is online. It says The Chocolate Factory. That's where it premiered in New York. And you can launch that whole thing. It's just got a bunch of stuff online. Yeah.
So I guess we're going to go.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, they try to want us out by 9.
Yeah, let me.
And if anybody left any objects, we want to make sure we leave it as we found it, so Cat Factory doesn't do it.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I just wanted to say, probably not your style of music and probably a little too mainstream, but there's a band called Silent Planet that I was surprised. They're a very political band, but I was surprised they did a song about surveillance and privacy. It's called Panopticon.
It's called what?
Panopticon.
Oh, it's called Panopticon.
Yeah.
All right. Silent Planet?
It's heavy metal, so it may not be your cup of tea.
It's not, but I'll give it a little
But you should look at the lyrics. The singer actually was going for his PhD in psychology.
Okay.
When the band got successful enough that he basically just quit school.
Yeah.
Or he's on